It's not really easy to sum up vertebrate ecology because they're extremely diverse and they're found all over the globe, including in the tropics and the polar regions, but vertebrates are probably the animals that you are most familiar with because they're the ones we associate when we think animals. You know, they're the things like our pets, our fish, our amphibian, our reptiles, our birds, even our mammals. We commonly use them as food, we employ them for labor, and they're all over where we can see them with our own eyes. So vertebrates first evolved in the ocean. The invertebrate ancestors of vertebrates, they had gill slits, but they were mostly used for filter feeding and not gas exchange. They got most of their oxygen they needed through their skin. As early vertebrates grew larger and they developed bony scales or plates between their tissues and the water, they had to use their gills for taking oxygen from the water. Gills are super complex, and we'll talk about those more once we get to our fish. Vertebrates evolved from an ancestor we call a tetrapod. A little bit about tetrapods. Tetrapods means four-legged. Tetra, four, pod, foot or leg. And tetrapods include all land-living vertebrates like frogs, turtles, hawks, lions. They arose about 350 to 365 million years ago during the Devonian period. And again, these consist of four-legged animals. So they're going to evolve from the Sarcopterygii fish, which is going to include things that live now like the Coelacanth and the Lungfish. Now, this may be weird, but tetrapods also include things that don't have four legs, like snakes, because the snakes actually evolved from a common tetrapod ancestor. So even though snakes that we know do not have legs, some, like the python, actually still have little pelvic bones where we can see their ancestors used to have legs and they used to be necessary for that organism. Obviously, they don't need it now. Snakes with legs would be pretty much regular reptiles. First land-dwelling vertebrates were reptiles. Our first semi-land-dwelling vertebrates were amphibians. Obviously, we know amphibians spend part of their life in the water, so they're partially aquatic, partially terrestrial. We have a few things that make vertebrate reproduction unique, including we have, for the most part, a male and a female sex. We have really cool reproductive strategies. So vertebrates have, some vertebrates can be oviparous, which means they lay eggs. Some can be viviparous, which means they give live birth. And some can be oviviparous, which means they give sort of what looks like live birth, but they're actually having eggs that hatch almost immediately after the parent lays them, or they hatch within the parent, the mother, and then it looks like they're coming out live, but they've actually been inside eggs. But we'll talk about that later. There are 5 really important characteristics that all vertebrates share. First, they have a notochord. They have a dorsal hollow nerve cord. They have pharyngeal gill slits, even though we don't use them anymore, a post-anal tail, and bone or cartilage. Now, we, for the most part, our skeletal structure is made up of bone. Things like sharks, however, are made up of cartilage, like the cartilage you can find at the tip of your nose. And we actually have a whole class of fish called cartilaginous fish. Now, let's get down to the 7 main classes of vertebrates. Now, most of these are actually fish. We have our agnatha, which are our most primitive fish. We have our chondrichthyes, which are cartilaginous fish. We have osteichthyes, which are fish that are bony. Think of like osteoporosis, when your bones are breaking down. Think of that when you think of osteichthyes. After that, so those are our first 3. After that, we have to talk about our amphibia. We have to talk about our reptilia, which are our reptiles, aves, which are our birds, and of course mammalia, which include the mammals such as us. All right, so take that with you. That was our introduction to vertebrates. Hope you enjoyed.